If we talk about the Nintendo 64, is it very easy for you to think about your favorite games from that console? What if instead of favorite, we say defining games? The games that far more than just being good games, they transcended the console. And when we talk about the NES, the Super Nintendo, and the N64, which are those defining games? We'll be talking about that in another exciting edition of A Cast of the Past, with a new episode available on podcast apps every single Sunday and throughout the week at youtube.com/acastofthepast. You can enjoy all of our content with yours truly, Juan Velas from Puerto Rico, joining me for this pretty interesting conversation from Boston, Massachusetts. We have Ryan McNulty. Now, Ryan, how easy is it for you to think about the fact that favorite doesn't necessarily mean it's the most important game or defining game of a console or a generation, right?
Yeah, this was definitely something, keeping in mind, knowing the topic ahead of time and preparing, that it was tough to try and separate what you felt was your favorite game or your favorite series. Try to remove that from the conversation and think about what was the title that really defined that console and, maybe was the influence for future series, future games that kind of really took things to the next level. It was a little bit of a difficult task to really try and take that bias out of the conversation.
And we actually have a lot of people included here because on the Discord, which is acastofthepast.com/Discord, a lot of you people, we've had over 10,000 listeners on podcast apps. That is just freaking awesome. A lot of you actually shared some of your picks, so we'll be talking about that throughout the episode. So just to whet people's appetite, if the conversation was, what is your favorite NES game? When we go back to the first console, not defining, just generally speaking, one of your top 5, which game would show up at the top?
For me, favorite NES game, I'm bad at most NES games, but I would probably have to go. I'd probably have to go with Zelda 2 because it's the game I felt the most accomplished completing. If you beat any NES game, I don't care what that game is, you should be proud of yourself because pretty much most of them are super difficult. But yeah, Zelda 2, because it was a game I did not like at first, but really grew to like and appreciate. It still definitely has plenty of flaws to it, but it is definitely a game that once I got around to getting better at it, it really I opened up to it a lot more and really, really like it now.
That's a pretty good pick. And I think when it comes to favorite games, I think Super Mario Brothers 3 has to be there just because it's a game that I still play. And I think we all have those games that it's nostalgia talking, right? It's like, oh, you're playing this. It's not the best game, but you're still enjoying it. Super Mario Brothers, I feel like you could get that to any kid now, and it wouldn't feel outdated. Now, some people may have a preference because, there was the Super Nintendo remaster or remake, right, with some altered sprites and looks, but just generally speaking, I think it's pretty good that we have that baseline just for everybody listening so they have that context. Now, if the question became, what is that game that defines the NES, which came out in 1995, that game that transcends the console and is just super important for it, would it be the same game? Or if not, what's your pick?
Yeah, so I had to think about this a lot because one interesting answer that came up that I don't think is actually going to be my answer, but is interesting to the conversation, is actually Rob the Robot. Because both you and I know, I haven't finished the book, but I listened to a good chunk of it, the book Console Wars.
Yeah.
You learn about how they originally packaged the NES with Rob the Robot to position it more as a toy, because at that time, consoles were going through this crash period and nobody really wanted to touch a console. So the NES's strategy was to position it with a toy, and that ended up being a key to its success. The other big key, obviously, being the original Super Mario Bros. So if we were to go by a game that defined the NES, it's tempting to go with the original Super Mario Brothers because it is, the game that really took Mario to the next level. And I should say Super Mario Brothers, not just the kind of more arcadey.
Yeah, I think
Mario
a lot of people
Brothers.
got that confused at first because when I was a kid, people told me, you got to play Mario Brothers. And I thought that was it, the arcade one. I'm like, ooh, this is not the same.
Or you picked up like some NES Classics thing and it has Mario Brothers on it. And you're like, oh, sweet. And then it's like, dun, 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 dun,
like,
dun, and you're like, this is not the game I was expecting. But yeah, I was going to say it's tempting to go with Super Mario Brothers, but I honestly have to go with Super Mario Brothers 3 because that is basically that type of platformer. I mean, it's very hard for any game to even touch what they were able to do with Super Mario Brothers 3 for a 2D platformer. And even though Super Mario Brothers is really the game that catapulted the NES into the stratosphere, I think Super Mario Brothers 3 refined that to such a degree that, as you said, anyone could pick it up today and it wouldn't feel outdated at all.
No, I think there's a really good reason why sometimes people say like, oh, this game's overrated, or everybody talks about, you think about N64, we'll be talking about that later, and there's always a whole lot of games that come up just right off the bat, right? Like Super Mario 64, GoldenEye, Mario Kart 64, but it is because of that, right? I think a really good way to answer this differently is, say it's 2021, and you have a kid that calls you and says, hey, I have never played the NES. Which are the 3 games that I should play, right? And I don't think every game should be amazing, but it should be memorable. And Super Mario Brothers 3 is everything. I mean, that game is just unbelievable. The music, the graphics, the gameplay, the fact that in the same console, it's the 3rd game, right? The 3rd game in the same console should be like, oh man, they are stretching this thin. The 3rd game in this console is like, dude, you don't even know what we are capable of, right?
Absolutely. It just the refinement, like I said, to look at Super Mario Brothers 1 versus Super Mario Brothers 3, sometimes it feels like it's not even on the same console because of how much it evolved so quickly. I mean, it's like the early NES games are like closer to almost to Atari than to some of the later NES games. It's kind of crazy how much they refined graphics and stuff in that system.
Yeah, and we have a couple of different things. So even though we are a 3-man podcast with these episodes, we only have 2 people. But Keith showed up via text message, or specifically Discord, and he mentioned the original Super Mario Brothers. You could argue that Mario Brothers is the most important game in video game history. It's the hit that both Nintendo and the video game industry at large needed to solidify themselves as an entertainment medium. Super Mario Bros. 3 is a better game in almost every way, but in my opinion, the first is more important. And I think in many ways, Keith is like a part 2 to your Rob conversation, which is Nintendo. I mean, we weren't there with the video game market crash. We hear about it, but it's like, wouldn't it be fascinating to see a video game world without Rob and without the first Super Mario Brothers? I don't think we'd be talking about all this stuff right now.
I think it would be a very different world. And yeah, to what Keith was saying, when it comes to this NES in particular, I think you can make an easy case for both Super Mario Brothers and Super Mario Brothers 3. It's really just, do you pick the one that like really started it all, or do you pick the one that was just the best version of that game on that system?
Exactly. And we have a couple of more comments here from the Discord. The first one comes to us from, let's scroll up here, from Ace Bunny, who also agrees with Super Mario Brothers. Chris collects things. Chris is actually a part of our Pokemon TCG episode, available now in the archives. Talks about Super Mario Brothers 3. Maydross also agrees. Sir Meatwad talks about the first one. And I think it's like a recurring theme that's happening here, right? And it's just because of the overall importance. Now, if the question was, okay, I think we've made a pretty decent case about why this is the top one. Is there any other game from that library that you're like, man, if we did not have this game, the video game market and video games as we know would be a little bit different?
2 definitely come to mind. One, I think, is Duck Hunt, actually. Duck Hunt was one of, I don't know if it's the first game to have an NES accessory, but it's definitely one of, well, obviously Rob the Robot, but Duck Hunt, I think, was also just a really well, it's probably the most popular game to have the accessory, especially because you had that Super Mario Brothers Duck Hunt like pack in with the system. Yeah. But certainly, as far as like home console light gun type of games, Duck Hunt was a key game in that. It was a great kind of like party game to, everyone kind of got a chance to play. I know there was track and field and things like that, but I do think Duck Hunt was kind of one of those pivotal games. Obviously, another game, The Legend of Zelda, was a very important game and pretty big at the time too. Not as big as Mario, but big enough to have its own cartoon and everything, and was a game that catapulted the home console adventure game, and also was important for having the save battery on a right. cartridge, which was an important thing for a long time. I mean, even pretty much up until like 3DS, I think even like you save onto the cartridge. So it's still something that's even used to this day to some degree. So there's a lot of, I think both of those games added a lot to the system. Not quite coming near Super Mario Brothers territory, but pretty important nonetheless.
And we actually have somebody that brought up the original Zelda game is their top pick. I'm hoping I get the name right, which is Girahim.
Girahim. It's after a Zelda character.
Yeah. So definitely, I think that's very inspiring. And then just to close off this NES part, and I think this conversation is going to be interesting. Like, I think it always evolves. Maybe with the NES, like Super Mario Brothers is super important, but maybe with other generations, it's like, hey, if you think about this question 5 years, 10 years from now, maybe it changes. But just to quote quickly here an article from IGN, they listed the top 100 NES games. At number 5, they have Castlevania 3, Dracula's Curse. We actually talked about Super Castlevania 4 on the Super Nintendo. That review is available on the archives. Number 4, this is one that I almost brought up despite the fact that I never beat it because I'm just awful at it, but Mega Man 2.
I think I might have used save states at one point, but Mega Man 2 is a great game. It's just, you gotta have a lot of patience. It's pretty tough.
And the number of Mega Man games. I think that, yeah, you have your Mario and Super Metroid definitely, but I think Mega Man has...
They were churning them out in those days.
We got 7, was it? 7 Mega Man games on the NES, I think.
Maybe, because was Mega Man 8 when they like started it on like the PlayStation 3 era consoles, right?
Oh, PS, what man? There are so many Mega.
Didn't they like they had like Mega Man, like you said, maybe 1 through 7 on NES, but then when they made Mega Man 8 like years later, not counting all like the X series and all the different ones.
They made 9 and 10. They made 9 and 10 on the PS3.
Okay, so it was 9 and 10. So I don't know where Mega Man 8 was. Maybe that was on NES.
8 was on the PlayStation and the Sega Saturn, 1996, 1997.
Okay. And then many years later, they just said, hey, Mega Man 9, and we're making it look like retro style, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, that was really cool. So let's just quickly look at the rest of the list here. Super Mario Brothers at number 3. The Legend of Zelda at number 2. And then number 1 is they wrote Super Mario Brothers. They forgot an I. IGN. Come on, you got staff that gets paid
0 out of 10. 0 out of 10 IGN.
Exactly. So Super Mario Brothers at number 1. So everybody watching and listening, feel free to follow us on Twitter, A Cast of the Past, and let us know like your favorite one or your most memorable defining game for the NES. Hey, thanks for checking out the video. If you liked it, please consider subscribing, and we are also available on podcast feeds. So search the name, click on the Sword and Stone, and enjoy a brand new episode every single Sunday.